You don't need a mask." The alien girl couldn't believe her eyes. Naira Starweaver's hands trembled as she adjusted her environmental mask for the third time in as many minutes. The readout confirmed what she already knew. The atmosphere in Space Station Helios was saturated with oxygen, a corrosive gas that could kill most sentient species in the galaxy. Yet here she stood, watching in horror as a human casually strolled through the airlock without any protective gear. "Welcome to Helios Station, Captain Hudson," she managed through her mask's translator, her silver eyes wide with concern. "But sir, your protective equipment." Captain James Hudson paused mid-stride, his weathered face breaking into an amused smile. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, dark eyes twinkling with mischief. "Just James is fine. And I don't need any protective gear, Dr. Starweaver. Humans breathe oxygen." Naira's luminescent markings flickered with distress, casting purple shadows on the station's metallic walls. As the station's lead xenobotanist, she'd studied countless species, but humans remained an enigma. That's impossible. Oxygen is highly reactive. It corrodes, it destroys. It keeps us alive, James interrupted gently. Every cell in our bodies needs it. We evolved breathing the stuff. He took an exaggerated breath, his chest rising and falling. See, still standing. The station's artificial lighting caught the iridescent scales along Naira's neck as she unconsciously took a step back. Her people, the Lumini, had evolved in low-oxygen environments, their bodies designed to extract trace elements from their homeworld's thin atmosphere. The idea of a species requiring such a volatile gas seemed absurd. "Fascinating," she whispered, her scientific curiosity overtaking her initial shock. "Your species must have remarkable cellular repair mechanisms to counteract the oxidative damage." The applications for xenobiology could be. A sudden alarm cut through their conversation, its harsh tone echoing through the station's corridors. Red warning lights began pulsing along the walls. "Warning. Containment breach detected in Botanical Lab 7. The station's AI announced. Hazardous specimen release imminent. Emergency protocols engage." Naira's markings paled. "No, that's impossible. The specimens are secured." Her voice trailed off as realization struck. "The new samples from Nexus Prime, they're reactive to oxygen." Without hesitation, James sprinted toward the lab, his military training evident in his fluid movements. "Lead the way, Doctor. Sounds like you could use someone who isn't afraid of a little oxygen." Naira hurried after him, her environmental suit whirring as it compensated for her quickened pace. The lab's entrance loomed before them, its security panel flashing warnings in multiple languages. "The specimens," she explained as she input emergency override codes. "They're from a newly discovered species. In their native environment, they're harmless. But when exposed to oxygen..." The door slid open, revealing chaos. The laboratory's containment units had ruptured, spilling their contents across the floor. The specimens, crystalline structures that had been dormant during collection, were now pulsing with angry red light, growing and multiplying as they reacted with the oxygen-rich atmosphere. "They're converting the oxygen into energy," Naira gasped, checking readings on her suit's scanner. "At this rate, they'll consume all breathable air in this section within minutes." James assessed the situation with practiced calm. "So we need to either stop the reaction or evacuate the air. Any ideas, Doctor?" Naira's mind raced through possibilities. The emergency ventilation system could purge the atmosphere, but the override controls are inside. She gestured to the far wall, now partially blocked by growing crystal formations. "Inside, where all the oxygen is." James grinned. "Good thing you've got a human handy." Before Naira could protest, he was moving, navigating through the spreading crystal growth with remarkable agility. "Captain, James, wait," she called out, but he was already halfway to the controls. The crystals seemed to reach for him, their structures elongating and branching like hungry fingers. James reached the control panel, and began inputting commands. The crystals grew faster, feeding on his exhaled breath. Naira watched in horror as they started to encircle them. "Almost got it," he called back, fingers flying over the controls. "But you might want to grab onto something." The ventilation system roared to life, just as the crystals were about to engulf him. Emergency shutters slammed down over the lab's windows as the atmosphere began to vent. The crystals, starved of oxygen, immediately began to shrink and go dormant. When the emergency was over and the lab repressurized, Naira found James leaning against the control panel, breathing heavily, but wearing a satisfied smile. "Still think oxygen is just a corrosive gas?" he asked, brushing crystal dust from his uniform. Naira's markings rippled with a mix of relief and fascination. "Perhaps," she admitted, "there's more to your species than I initially thought." She paused, tilting her head curiously. "Though I still can't believe you just breathe it all the time." "Stick around, Dr. Starweaver," James chuckled, "and I'll show you just how many surprises humans can offer, starting with how we celebrate successful crisis management. There's this thing called coffee I think you should experience." As they left the lab, Naira found herself reconsidering everything she thought she knew about humans. Perhaps these oxygen-breathing beings weren't as fragile as she'd assumed, and perhaps she realized as she watched James cheerfully explain the concept of caffeine, they were exactly what the galaxy needed, a species crazy enough to breathe poison and smile about it. 3 days after the crystal incident, Naira found herself in her private lab, surrounded by holographic displays of human cellular structure. She adjusted her mask absently, still unused to the strange comfort of working alongside James without a sealed barrier between them. "So you're telling me," she said, manipulating a 3D model of human hemoglobin, "that your blood cells actively seek out oxygen. They don't just tolerate it, they need it." James watched the spinning molecular display with amusement. "That's what makes our blood red. The iron in our hemoglobin binding to oxygen." He pointed to a specific part of the model. "Though I'll admit, you're making it sound a lot more dramatic than my old biology teachers did." Naira's markings pulsed with excitement as she pulled up comparison data. "Because it is dramatic. Look at this." She gestured, and a new hologram appeared. A simulation of standard xenobiological cellular structures. Most spacefaring species evolved to minimize oxygen interaction. We developed complex mechanisms to protect against oxidative damage. But humans, she brought up a side-by-side comparison. You didn't just adapt to oxygen. You weaponized it. "Weaponized might be a strong word," James chuckled, but his expression turned thoughtful as he studied the displays. "Though I suppose our endurance capabilities do come from our oxygen processing." "Endurance?" Naira's silver eyes widened. "What do you mean?" James scratched his chin, considering how to explain. "Well, in our early evolution, humans were persistence hunters. We couldn't outrun our prey, but we could outlast them. Keep chasing until they exhausted themselves." Naira's markings flickered rapidly, her species equivalent of a surprised blink. "You chased prey in an oxygen atmosphere until they got tired." "For hours sometimes," James confirmed. "Our oxygen processing let us keep going when other animals had to stop. Sweating helped too. Let us regulate our temperature while moving." "Sweating?" Naira quickly pulled up more biological data. "You mean your thermal regulation system that expels water through your skin? The one that uses evaporative cooling in." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "In an oxygen atmosphere, of course. It's all connected." She began rapidly inputting calculations, her fingers dancing over the holographic controls. New models appeared, showing the interplay between human respiratory, circulatory, and thermal regulation systems. "This is incredible," she breathed. "Your entire biology is optimized for oxygen utilization, every system working together to extract maximum efficiency from what most species consider a toxin." James walked around the display, watching as the models demonstrated human biological systems in action. When you put it that way, we do sound pretty impressive. Though I'm curious why you're so interested in our oxygen processing. Naira's markings dimmed slightly, a sign of hesitation. The crystal incident got me thinking. Those specimens were dormant until exposed to oxygen, then displayed remarkable energy production capabilities, similar to how human cells utilize oxygen, but far less controlled. She brought up new data, readings from the crystal outbreak. The efficiency of their oxygen conversion was astronomical, but ultimately destructive. Humans, though, she gestured to his biological data. You've achieved perfect balance, controlled oxidation at a cellular level. Do you realize how unprecedented that is? James leaned against a lab bench, his expression turning serious. You think there's more to it than just evolution? I think, Naira said carefully, that the galaxy is full of mysteries, and humans might be one of the biggest. She hesitated, then added, there's something else, something I found in the station's deep archives. She accessed another file, and a new hologram appeared, ancient star charts overlaid with biological data. These records suggest that Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere isn't natural, at least not entirely. James straightened, his casual demeanor falling away. What do you mean? The data is fragmentary, but it suggests that Earth's atmospheric composition was engineered, modified over millions of years to create the perfect environment for a species that could process oxygen efficiently. Naira's markings pulsed with nervous energy. A species like humans, are you suggesting someone designed humans to breathe oxygen? James asked, his voice carefully neutral. I'm suggesting, Naira replied, that someone might have designed oxygen to be breathable by humans. The question is, why? Before James could respond, the lab's communication system chimed. Dr. Starweaver, Captain Hudson, the station's AI announced, your presence is requested in the main conference room. Priority 1. They shared a look, both knowing that Priority 1 meant serious trouble. As they hurried from the lab, Naira couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of discovering something massive. The pieces were there, humans' unique oxygen processing, the ancient records, even the crystal specimens' reaction to oxygen, but she couldn't yet see the full picture. What she did know was that James Hudson, with his casual acceptance of breathing what most species considered poison, represented something unprecedented in galactic biology. And if her suspicions were correct, understanding why humans evolved, or were engineered, to breathe oxygen might be crucial to facing whatever crisis awaited them in the conference room. James, she said as they reached the conference room doors, whatever we discover, I'm glad I have an oxygen breather on my side. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. Let's hope that advantage comes in handy for whatever's waiting for us in there. The doors slid open, revealing a room full of grim-faced station officials and one very worried-looking admiral. The holographic display in the center of the room showed what appeared to be a massive spatial anomaly approaching Helios Station, and at its edges, crystalline structures very similar to their recent visitors were beginning to form. The conference room's holographic display cast an eerie blue glow over the assembled faces as Admiral Thane finished her briefing. The spatial anomaly hung in the center of the room like a malevolent eye, its edges crystallizing in real time. The anomaly appeared 3 hours ago, the Admiral explained, her weathered face grave. It's already consumed 2 unmanned research outposts. Every station it approaches experiences the same phenomenon, rapid crystal growth followed by total atmospheric depletion. Naira's markings pulsed with recognition, just like our lab incident, but on a massive scale. She manipulated the holographic controls, highlighting the crystalline formations. They're not just similar to our specimens, they're identical. And they're heading straight for Helios Station, James added, studying the anomaly's trajectory. How long do we have? 6 hours at current speed, Admiral Thane replied. We've already begun evacuation procedures, but But Helios Station is too important to abandon, Naira finished. All eyes turned to her as her markings flickered with intense thought. This station houses the largest xenobiology database in this sector. The research conducted here, it's irreplaceable. James stepped closer to the hologram, his expression thoughtful. These crystals consume oxygen, right? What if we could use that? Make it work for us instead of against us. Naira's silver eyes widened as she followed his train of thought. You're suggesting we deliberately trigger the reaction, that the energy release would be catastrophic. Unless, James grinned, we could control it. Direct it. You said yourself that humans have mastered controlled oxidation. What if we could apply that principle on a larger scale? Admiral Thane leaned forward, her interest piqued. Explain. Over the next hour, James and Naira outlined their plan. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it might be their only chance. They would modify the station's atmospheric processors to create a concentrated oxygen barrier, essentially turning Helios's life support system into a weapon. The crystals will be drawn to the oxygen, Naira explained, her markings pulsing with nervous energy. If we can create a precise enough gradient, we might be able to guide their growth, like steering a river by building banks. And once we have them contained, James continued, we hit them with an electromagnetic pulse tuned to their resonant frequency, the same one we discovered during our lab incident, which would disrupt their molecular structure. Naira finished, causing them to go dormant. But she hesitated, her markings dimming. Someone would need to manually adjust the oxygen flow from within the affected areas. The automated systems aren't precise enough. I'll do it, James said immediately. James, no, Naira protested. Even with your oxygen processing capabilities, the concentration levels we're talking about, they could be toxic even to humans. He met her gaze steadily. Better me than someone who can't breathe it at all. Besides, he smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. You said humans weaponized oxygen, right? Time to put that to the test. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. The station's non-essential personnel were evacuated while engineering teams modified the atmospheric systems according to their specifications. Naira worked frantically to calibrate the electromagnetic pulse, her markings barely visible as she focused all her energy on the task. James found her in her lab just before he was due to begin his part of the mission. She was making final adjustments to a specialized environmental suit, one designed to help him survive the extreme oxygen concentrations he would face. The suit will help filter the excess oxygen, she explained, not looking up from her work. But it can only do so much. You'll need to rely on your own biological processing capabilities for the rest. Her hands trembled slightly as she made a final adjustment. Naira. James's voice was gentle. She finally looked up, her silver eyes meeting his dark ones. I'll be fine. Humans are surprisingly hard to kill, remember? This isn't a joke, James, she said softly. What we discovered about human oxygen processing, I don't think it was just evolution. Someone engineered your species to be perfect oxygen processors. Yes, but I think it was for a specific purpose. She gestured to the anomaly readings. I think it was for this. James absorbed this in silence. You think humans were created to fight these things? I think, Naira said carefully, that nothing in nature evolves to breathe poison unless there's a very good reason. She handed him the suit, which is why you have to survive this. We need answers, and I think you're part of the key to finding them. James took the suit, his fingers brushing hers. Well, when you put it that way, how can I disappoint? His smile was warmer this time, more genuine. Keep working on that pulse. I'll handle the oxygen. As he turned to leave, Naira called out, James. He paused in the doorway. The suit has a direct link to my lab. I'll be monitoring your vitals. Worried about me, Dr. Starweaver. Her markings flickered with what might have been embarrassment. Purely scientific interest, Captain Hudson. Someone has to document how the human oxygen weapon performs under stress. His laugh echoed back as he headed toward his position. Naira watched him go, her markings pulsing with emotions she couldn't quite name. Then she turned back to her work. They had a station to save, and perhaps more importantly, a mystery to unravel. The crystals were coming, drawn to the oxygen that humans had mastered. And somewhere in that connection lay answers that could change everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. Oxygen levels at 150%. James's voice crackled through the lab's communication system, starting to feel like a sunny day in the Himalayas up here. Naira's fingers flew across her control panel, monitoring his vital signs. His heart rate was elevated, blood oxygen saturation approaching dangerous levels, but his voice remained steady. Humans, she was learning, had a remarkable capacity for staying calm in impossible situations. "The crystals are responding," she reported, watching as the growing formations followed their carefully constructed oxygen gradient. "But James, your cellular oxidation rates are exceeding safety parameters." "Good thing I've got millions of years of evolution backing me up," he replied, though she could hear the strain in his voice now. "Or was it engineering? Still need to have a chat about that theory of yours." A warning light flashed on Naira's display. "James, the crystal growth is accelerating faster than predicted. They're adapting to the oxygen concentration." In the station's upper levels, James adjusted the atmospheric controls, his movements growing sluggish as he fought against the overwhelming oxygen saturation. "Remember what you said about humans weaponizing oxygen?" He coughed. "Time to test that theory." He input a series of commands, and Naira watched in horror as his section's oxygen levels spiked to 200%. "James, stop. Those levels are lethal even for humans." "Maybe," he grunted, "but look at your readings." Naira's protests died in her throat as she saw what was happening. The crystals weren't just following their oxygen gradient anymore. They were being overwhelmed by it. At these extreme concentrations, their energy absorption process was breaking down. "It's working," she breathed, her markings pulsing with excitement. "But James, you need to get out of there. Your body can't process that much oxygen." "Actually," a new voice interrupted, as Admiral Thane burst into the lab. "He can, because that's exactly what he was designed to do." The Admiral threw a data crystal onto Naira's desk. As she inserted it into her system, ancient schematics filled her holographic displays. Detailed biological engineering plans for what was unmistakably human DNA. "Where did you get this?" Naira demanded, her markings flaring with shock as she read the data. "It was in the station's most classified archives," Thane replied grimly. "Encrypted so deeply, it took an AI quantum system 3 years to crack it. We've known for months that humans were engineered, but we didn't know why. Until now." Through the comm system, James's labored breathing filled the lab. "Want to share with the rest of the class?" Naira's hands trembled as she explained what she was seeing. The ancient records were right. Humans weren't just engineered to breathe oxygen. You were designed to be living weapons against these crystals. Your entire respiratory system is a perfect counter to their energy absorption process. "The crystals aren't attacking the station," Thane added. "They're attempting to establish a foothold in our reality. They're interdimensional parasites that feed on oxygen-rich atmospheres, breaking down the barriers between dimensions as they feed." Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere wasn't an accident. It was bait. "Bait?" James wheezed. "You're saying Earth is one giant trap." "A trap and a forge," Naira corrected, her scientific mind racing ahead as she processed the ancient data. "The high oxygen environment forced your species to evolve, or rather, to develop according to your engineered template, into the perfect defense against these entities. Every time you breathe, every time your cells process oxygen, you're performing the exact opposite of what these crystals do. You stabilize dimensional barriers instead of breaking them down. That's why the crystals are failing under the high oxygen concentration," Thane explained. Human oxygen processing creates a unique quantum resonance that disrupts their ability to breach dimensional walls. The ancients didn't just give humans the ability to breathe oxygen. They made you living dimensional anchors. In the oxygen-flooded upper levels, James absorbed this information while fighting to stay conscious. His vision was starting to blur, but he could feel something changing in his body. It was as if every cell was humming, resonating with the invisible barriers between realities. The electromagnetic pulse, he gasped. Naira, it's not just about disrupting their molecular structure. It needs to match human cellular resonance. Naira's markings flashed with sudden understanding. She quickly recalibrated the pulse, tuning it to match the frequency of human oxygen processing. James, I'm ready to trigger the pulse, but these oxygen levels, they're still going to kill you. No, Thane interrupted, studying the ancient data. They won't. Look at this section about emergency activation protocols. Under extreme oxygen exposure, the engineered components of human DNA become fully active. He's not dying. He's awakening. As if to confirm her words, James felt a sudden shift in his body. The overwhelming pressure of the oxygen-rich environment transformed into something else. A surge of power, as if every cell in his body had suddenly remembered its true purpose. Naira. His voice was stronger now, clearer. Do it. Trigger the pulse. She hesitated for just a moment, her silver eyes fixed on his vital signs. Then she activated the pulse, tuned to the exact frequency of human cellular respiration. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The crystals, overwhelmed by the combination of extreme oxygen concentration and the resonant pulse, began to shatter. But instead of releasing their stored energy in a catastrophic explosion, they simply unraveled, their interdimensional structure collapsing in on itself. In the lab, Naira and Thane watched in amazement as the spatial anomaly followed suit, folding in on itself like a closing flower until it vanished completely. But Naira had eyes only for James's vital signs, which had stabilized at levels that should have been impossible. James. She called through the comm. James, please respond. There was a moment of terrible silence. Then, so, his voice came through, tired but amused. Apparently, I'm a living dimensional anchor. That's new. Naira's markings lit up with relief, but Thane's expression remained serious. Not new, the Admiral corrected. Very, very old. And if these crystals have returned, we're going to need every human's hidden abilities. The ancients built humanity as a weapon. It's time to remember how to use it. The observation deck of Helios Station offered a panoramic view of the stars, but Naira's attention was focused on the medical readings displayed before her. 2 weeks had passed since the crystal incident, and James's body continued to display remarkable changes. Your oxygen processing efficiency has increased by 300%, she reported, her markings pulsing with scientific excitement. It's as if the extreme exposure activated dormant genetic sequences. You're not just breathing oxygen anymore. You're manipulating dimensional energy through oxidative processes. James stood at the viewport, watching distant ships arrive through the station's defense perimeter. More humans were coming, volunteers ready to unlock their hidden potential. In other words, he smiled, I'm still breathing poison, just more efficiently now. A poison that makes you one of the most important beings in the galaxy, Naira corrected, setting down her scanner. The crystals weren't an isolated incident. We've detected spatial anomalies forming near 3 other stations. The interdimensional parasites are launching a coordinated invasion. And humanity is the galaxy's immune system, James mused. Engineered guardians who spent thousands of years thinking we were just really good at jogging. Naira's markings flickered with amusement, but her expression remained serious. The ancient data suggests your species was meant to be more than guardians. The oxygen processing, the dimensional anchoring, they're just the beginning. Humans were designed to be a bridge between realities, maintaining the boundaries while being able to cross them safely. James turned from the viewport, his dark eyes meeting her silver ones. Is that why you've been working with Dr. Van in genetics, looking for ways to unlock more of our potential? Her markings dimmed slightly, the equivalent of a blush. Actually, I've been working on something else, something that might help our species work together more effectively. She brought up a new holographic display, showing a complex molecular structure. The ancients didn't just engineer humans, they created integration protocols, ways for other species to safely adapt to oxygen environments. We thought it was impossible, but with your activated genetic sequences as a template. You want to breathe oxygen? James asked, surprised. I want to understand, Naira corrected. Everything we thought we knew about biology, about evolution, about the very structure of our reality. It's all changing. Humans aren't just part of the galaxy's defense system. You're proof that we can be more than what our original environments made us. Before James could respond, the station's alert system activated. Priority alert, the AI announced. Multiple spatial anomalies detected in nearby sectors. All personnel to emergency stations. The observation deck's displays filled with tactical data. The crystal entities had returned in force, their interdimensional breaches appearing simultaneously across multiple systems. But this time, they faced a prepared defense. The human volunteers are in position. Admiral Thane's voice came through the comm system. Strike teams are ready to deploy dimensional anchoring protocols. Commander Hudson, you'll lead the first response team. James smiled at his new rank, then turned to Naira. Sure you don't want to wait for a less apocalyptic moment to test your integration protocol? Her markings pulsed with determination as she held up an injector. The end of the world seems like the perfect time to try breathing poison. She administered the treatment to herself before she could reconsider. Besides, someone needs to monitor your vital signs during combat. And these parasites have a habit of disrupting remote communications. James watched with concern as her body absorbed the treatment. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then Naira gasped, her markings flaring brilliantly as she took her first unfiltered breath of oxygen. The molecular resonance, she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. I can feel it. The way it flows through everything, the barriers between dimensions. She looked at James with new understanding. Is this how you always see the world? Usually with less dimensional awareness, he admitted, stepping closer. The whole living anchored thing is still pretty new. How do you feel? Like I'm finally seeing the full picture. Her markings were pulsing with excitement and something else, something that made James's breath catch. Humans weren't just engineered to fight these parasites. You were designed to teach the rest of us how to evolve beyond our limitations. Another alert sounded. The spatial anomalies were growing. Through the viewport, they could see the first crystalline formations beginning to emerge from the breaches, ready to show these interdimensional parasites why they should fear oxygen breathers. James asked, offering his hand. Naira took it, her markings synchronizing with his heightened biological rhythms, ready to show them why they should fear us working together. As they headed toward the deployment bay, they passed more station personnel undergoing the integration protocol. Humans and aliens working together, breaking down barriers that had seemed insurmountable just weeks ago. The crystal entities had meant to invade their reality, but instead they had triggered an evolution that the ancients had planned millennia ago. In the hangar, James and Naira boarded their ship along with other newly integrated teams. The vessel's systems had been modified to enhance their natural dimensional anchoring abilities, turning each ship into a mobile reality stabilization platform. All teams, prepare for deployment. Admiral Thane's voice echoed through the hangar. And remember, you're not just fighting for this reality. You're fighting for all of them. As their ship launched into space, Naira reached for James's hand again. You know what's truly remarkable? She asked, her markings glowing softly in the cockpit's light. Out of all the poisons in the universe, oxygen brought us together. James smiled, feeling the resonance between them, the shared rhythm of their oxygen processing cells maintaining the barriers of reality. Maybe that was part of the ancients' plan too. After all, what better way to protect all realities than to give their guardians a reason to love breathing poison? Their ship moved into formation with the others, ready to face whatever came through the dimensional breaches. But now they faced it together, breathing the same air, sharing the same purpose. The interdimensional parasites had thought oxygen-rich atmospheres would be their gateway to invasion. Instead, they had awakened humanity's true purpose and catalyzed an evolution that would change the galaxy forever. As they approached the first anomaly, James and Nira breathed in perfect synchronization, their cells humming with the power to reshape reality itself. The battle for existence would be fought not just with weapons and ships, but with every breath they took together. And they weren't just breathing poison anymore. They were breathing hope.